Hi, my name is Doug Johnson. I'm a solution consultant with Acumatica. During this session, I'll be talking to you about reporting tools. Reporting tools are important because the value of the ERP system isn't only what you can get into it, but it's very much what you can get out of it. Acumatica has several different tools that can help you with your process, and we'll break this session into 3 different sections. We'll have one about our financial report manager, one about a generic inquiry tool, and the third will be about the report designer. Each has specific benefits and advantages. The analytical report manager is very important because it can access ledgers. It can be used by your layman, a typical accountant or somebody that's not familiar with IT, and it only has access to the ledger data. So it's a little limited in what it has access to, but it's very effective at producing accurate financial reports that can be sliced and diced according to your business. The report designer includes all the data. So just like the analytical report manager, it can be managed in a way that you can create interesting reports that can be laid out very neatly on a page. It has access to all the different tables and illustrations within the actual Acumatica data classes, but it's a little more difficult to use and requires some additional training. The generic inquiry writer is the basis for many things that we do. It helps you create different views of your data that are consumed online. It feeds our system of O data that can be produced and fed into a business intelligence tool. And it's also very important as a driving factor in creating dashboards and other pieces of real-time data that make a web-based application such as Acumatica so appealing. So once again, we'll be going through this in 3 different sections. This section is going to focus on the first one, the reporting tool called Analytical Report Writer. The key benefits of all of these report writers is to keep in mind that the security policies and features that we have extend. Every time you create a report, the underlying security attributes that go along with those reports carries through even at the data level. All the customizations you do to Acumatica are also included in the reports. So if I add a field to the Acumatica data set, that field becomes available to all my report designers and tools. So the first section we're going to look at is the Financial Report Writer, ARM. So let's go into the software to see how that would be set up. The Financial Report Writer, not surprisingly, is located in the financial section of Acumatica. It's under Finance, General Ledger, and the Setup area in the configuration area. As you can see with the demonstration data that's available to you, there's a number of reports that have already been created. These are all financial in nature. So you have balance sheets, profit and loss reports, cash flows. It's also important to note that you can get data out of projects as well as from the general ledger. For this session, we'll be focusing mostly on the general ledger reports, though. So let's take a look at a simple P&L report, and we'll show you a few of the different features and attributes of it. To create any report inside Acumatica using this report designer, you go in and you create a row set, a column set, and a unit set. Each one of them plays a role in what you need to put together for your report. So for example, here's how it lays out once I run the report. Your row set helps define all these different row headers and the different rows of your report. Your column set lets you go define different things like periods or financial periods. Things also, it can include different ledgers. It can include budgets versus actuals. It can have calculated columns. The column set's very handy in coming up with all of those types of data. And then the unit set is used to aggregate your data so that multiple reports can be broken down and roll up into a consolidation. So let's go show what that would actually look like. So for a profit and loss, we're going to go ahead and preview the report. When you run the initial preview, you can specify what you want the user to enter. So in this case, we request a ledger. You'll notice I can run this off of different ledgers, and then I can run it for several different financial periods. Those are the baselines that are fed into the actual reporting tool. So if I go run the report, you can see I get some data that comes out. Up here is the grouping category. This is, as I showed, what happens when you go to the unit set. So I can see a breakdown by what's at my headquarters level, a subsidiary level, or a complete consolidated area. I'll show in a bit about how to go ahead and create those types of things. Now, the most important thing to realize is that all these numbers are drill down. So if I wanted to, for instance, investigate this sales revenue of $400,000 for the period to date, I can click that number and it drills down to a sub-account report. My sub-accounts in this case have been defined by product group. So if I want to, I can take a look at how my consumer sales are doing. Within my consumer sales, I get a list of transactions that have occurred within the time period specified, and I can either view the GL batch, or I can actually even drill down into the invoice that created the document in the first place. So just like that, I'm able to get down to a level of detail and troubleshoot anything that might be impacting my financials. Obviously, on the invoices themselves, you can also have attached files and other things that would provide auditing backup in case you needed it. All this makes Acumatica a very powerful tool for people who are trying to do financials, troubleshoot financials, and satisfy auditing requirements. So the drill down, once again, is a very important feature to show. Let's talk a little bit more about row sets. We'll get started in that area. So notice the first row set we have defined here is our revenue row set. It's broken down into two different types of rows. We have a sales revenue and a sales freight. Let's see how that was generated. So if I click my pencil button next to my row set, you'll see that it consists of several different types of areas. The revenue area, all these captions, these are simply areas that are printable in the report. So they provide, as it says, a caption. The first interesting area occurs when I get down here to this type called GL. That means it's going to pull some actual data. Now, rather than pulling every single piece of data in every GL account, I aggregate things by data source. This allows me to be very flexible with how I go ahead and create my reports, and it also means that if I go back later and change my GL entries, my reports don't all have to be rewritten as they had to be in some old types of packages you might be used to. To specify the data source, simply define the account class. All these account classes are linked to specific GL accounts, and will add those GL accounts into this line of your report. Notice under the expand area, I specified account. I could have also gone down to a sub-account level, but that's going to produce a more lengthy report. The account, by expanding the account, it means don't just show one line for revenue, but show one line for each GL account that makes up that piece of revenue. Now after the other part, and this is a common area that you will see, is this type of data selector. The other data selector that you can pick is this idea of turnover, which gives you the period to date revenue. You can select credits, debits, beginning balances, and other things if you want more of a balance sheet type of area to select data from. On my row set, I typically don't specify that amount type. That's most commonly on the report level or on the column set level. That's just a best practice. It's not necessarily something you need to follow. Now the other types of line you might see in here, you see you can add lines for making your report look nice, and then you can add a total field. This is a very easy way to go in and select different things within your report. So I could do a common thing, which would be a column, which would be A, B, C, D, E, and a row, which you would specify this column number here. By building a total line and specifying at 0100, it's going to add up all those rows that get expanded in the sales area and provide a total for that section. You'll also notice that over here I have some basic things in terms of formatting. I can hide 0 rows. I can also, if I don't want to show empty rows, I can suppress them. And then I can link rows to one another. Linking rows is important because if you don't want to show a line, if there is no, for example, total, let's say your total is blank and you don't want to show a line, then you can specify that, and when that gets hidden, then all that will follow along with it. So those are the basics of creating an actual row set. There's other different new techniques that we've added in 5.0. So you'll see here, there's the ability to sort rows. If you need to sort a particular area so that your largest numbers appear first, we did a sort descending. So that's sort D. You pick row 300 to 345, and that's B stands for the column that you want to sort. We'll get to the column sets in a second. You can also go down And you can see you can do sums too. You can specify commas and specify different ranges. You'll notice there's a full variety of different text functions and other functions that you can apply to your report, as well as there's different application functions which are useful for specifying things like which unit set is on the report and pulling other data. Finally, up here you'll see there's the parameters. These are when you specify a starting period, you'll be able to pull that starting period and display it in your report. And last but not least, some global parameters that help do things like count your pages to display it at the top of your report. Once again, those are most frequently used in the column set. So now we've gotten down, this is the basics of how to go ahead and create a row set. Let's go next to our column set. The column set gives you the functionality to add different types of data based on those simple accounting rows that you've created. In this case, we've got a real simple one where we have a year-to-date and a period-to-date effort where we show different columns for that. Now, let's say we wanted to do something, we could just create one called a column, and we could add a new type of calculation column, for example. So let's go down here, we'll create a new column. Instead of just pulling information from the GL, we're going to actually do a calculation. And we're going to do a real simple calculation. We're just going to take the year-to-date, which is column B, and we're going to subtract out the period-to-date. And maybe we'd like to go up here in the header section and give this a nice title like year-to-date minus period-to-date, and hit save. Now, I haven't done any interesting formatting, so my formatting is going to look rather bizarre when I run this report. But it gives you a general idea of how that can be set up and used to just simply go ahead and add a column set. Down here at the bottom, you'll notice with my additions column, I didn't have to go in and enter anything. I'm just going to leave the amount type blank. But you can specify specific branches to be columns. You can specify different financial periods. And I'll get into a couple more reports where those have come in useful in a second. So for now, let's go see how our customization is done as we rerun our existing report that I showed earlier. We'll keep all the same parameters. And there you have, as specified and expected, a pretty ugly looking column in terms of what's, we'll call it calculation-wise, it's correct. It's not that pleasing to look at. So let's go look at a couple formatting techniques within the column set. So we'll go in. One of the easiest things to do, hit copy style, and then go paste the style. So that's going to take care of some of the things that maybe didn't look right in our header section. You also have some capability here to go change your formatting. And we didn't really allow enough space for that. So let's add 140 extra to there. And we'll take away a few digits or size over there. We can go in, once again, let's do a copy style. Save that first. And we'll go fill out a style for down here. So now that we've done our initial report, let's make things look a little bit better. We're going to actually use this copy and paste style feature to make our report headings look a little bit better and to add that line in the header section. The other thing that we want to do is down in here, we want to format our numbers so that instead of being a long list of run-on digits, we apply the appropriate commas and other things. And finally, we'll allow a little bit more room for that column and maybe shrink that one down appropriately. So now we've gone ahead and applied a minimal amount of formatting, and so we'll rerun our report. Keep the same parameters. And now you'll see we're pretty close in about a minute and a half, maybe not even. We've gone ahead and we've done a quick calculation column that subtracts one column from the other. Notice that there's no drill down in these particular areas because it's a calculated column. Based on the calculation, we can't drill down into specific features. So that covers a couple of them: unit sets, row sets, and column sets. Let's next talk about unit sets. As part of the demonstration data, I have a couple different unit sets that we can select from, but let's go see how that's derived. So to do that, I'm going to click the pencil button and open up my unit sets. This happens to be the branches. For my consolidated report, notice that my data source is blank. That means I'm selecting everything. For my headquarters, notice that I've selected a specific area, the starting branch for headquarters. I could have also specified an ending range, but in this case, I'm just going to take one. And then last but not least, for my subsidiary, I did a similar thing. One of the things, of course, you'll have to note as a demoer is that if you add up A plus B, but you have a third branch, the sum of these two may not equal your consolidated report because there may be data that's not included. Now, likewise, let's just show what it would look like from a product perspective. You can also have sub-elements of this too. So you can roll up your consumer goods by different categories and have different subcategories in there if you need to as well. So once again, all products has no stipulation. In this particular case, instead of specifying a branch, I specify a starting sub-account. I could even, as I say, go into a different sub-account if I need to and draw from a list of those if I wanted to select something different there. So this makes it very easy to go create reports rapidly. Once I've done this, I can go specify the report. If I'm happy with the report, I can add it to my sitemap. The benefit of adding it to a sitemap is that it becomes available for specific security, and it shows up over here so that anybody can go and run it or reference it. So the very same P&L reports that we see and create here can be shown in your typical financial statements area. To create rapid new reports, it's as simple as selecting a different unit set, and then you can see that I've got my same report that's now broken out by different sub-item. It's broken out by my, instead of by branches, it's broken out by my different product groups. So I can get sales and everything else by different product group. It's an extremely powerful tool in that regards to create things. Just to show you a couple other examples, we have a 12-month rolling report. So if I go in and take a look at this one, it's going to specify a period of when I want to start. Let's say we want to take a look at last year. So we're going to end this report on the end of last year. And now you can see you have a month-by-month situation of your profit and loss that ends in over a one-year period. Once again, all these numbers are drilled down. And let's take a look at actually how we got it. So notice there's a lot of different columns here. Your columns in this case, if we open up that column set, have been specified so that you go back one financial period to show this column. To show this column, you go back two financial periods. You can also go back or forward 1 year and then a different month as well. Once you get a little more used to doing text functions and printing out formulas, you can see we have things like that as well that have been pre-formatted. Most of what I do, I borrow on existing work by using the existing reports and copying and pasting. So you'll find a wide variety of different reports here that are available for those types of things. Now that we've taken a look at the financial report writer, let's take a look at the generic inquiry writer. The generic inquiry writer, as we mentioned before, is important for pulling data from anywhere within the system. The way that the data can be pulled by the generic inquiry writer is from any table within the database. But the generic inquiry tool doesn't actually pull database tables. It pulls something called a data access class. The data access class is what allows Acumatica to be database agnostic. So in other words, we can use Microsoft SQL as well as we can use MySQL and use similar items. So let's go ahead and show an example of how we can go pull, for example, journal data from our existing database that we've created with our demo data. To do that, we'll log in as the administrator and we'll navigate to the generic inquiry tool. The generic inquiry tool is located in the customization or in the system customization area under the generic inquiry. So if I just wanted to go ahead and create a new inquiry, let's say I want to find GL transactions. I go in, type a name for my query, pick a table name, Immediately it'll go through and it'll find a list of all the different data classes that match that name and hit save. For my results grid, I can go in, I can specify several individual fields and pick out the specific ones I want to display, or I can be quick and lazy and select all fields and hit save. Now I'm ready to run a quick inquiry that's going to pull back all my GL transactions. Now I haven't done a lot of formatting or prettying up of the data. We'll get into examples of that in just a little bit. Let's say we wanted to go in, now that we have our data here, we wanted to go in and start narrowing it down. So let's say we only want receivables. Type the word, contains the word receive. Let's try that again, maybe with a better speller. And we'll do all our accounts receivable. I can also go in and I can specify different columns. So let's say, for example, that I only want ones where the debit amount is greater than or equal to 10,000. So now I've got a list of inquiries, and I could even sort this if I wanted to. As needed, I can go in, and now I can add that as a dashboard once I'm happy with my inquiry. So I could go in, and let's say I wanted to add this as a table. Now you'll notice that there's a ton of fields selected here. Maybe we don't want all of those to display. So we would go through and uncheck various table fields that we don't want to see. And then it would immediately become available on a dashboard. So let's go add this one real quickly we'll go add it to finance, and we'll do it to accounts receivable. This one's not going to look very good because I've got an extremely large number of fields. But if we go to a finance accounts receivable and click that dashboard, you'll get the idea of how easy it is to go ahead and actually create a query and display it into a dashboard. Once again, I didn't narrow my fields enough, so we'll go ahead and remove that one. Now, some of the formatting that I just did in terms of limiting my data can also be done automatically within the generic inquiry. So for example, within the demonstration data, there's something called, let's see if I can find one that's already interesting. We'll do one called sales orders and quotes. In this one, I've combined a couple of tables. So you can go combine tables by specifying a relationship. We have several different types of relationships you can specify: left, rights, inners, fulls, and joins, and crosses. All of these are documented within the help files if you need to understand more about what those are. Within those, you can pick out occasionally which fields are used to map correctly. So in this case, in the sales order table, we use something called customer ID that matches the B account ID in the customer table. And once I've joined the tables, I've also done something in this one where I've specified several different parameters that I want to collect at runtime. So remember, when I did the GL transaction, I went in and I sorted and grouped and specified my data after it had been run. This allows me to specify parameters that I can then go in and create different conditions for. These conditions are applied before the data is selected so that it's only returning a distinct number of values. In my results grid, you'll also notice that in this query, I've been a little more selective about what I've picked. I've picked items from both tables. I've specified in some cases a specific width. I can put in captions, which are the titles in the field if I need to do that as well. So when I view this particular inquiry, you'll notice that the results are going to be a lot more polished. The other thing that you're going to notice when I actually viewed this inquiry is it moved me automatically to the location in the sitemap where I've mapped this inquiry to. So it's in distribution, sales orders, reports, audit. So that's where I can normally run this particular report from. The way that I specified that was once I was happy with my query, I went and put in a sitemap title as well as a sitemap location. Last, I want to talk about something that's recent with the 5.1 build for this field this thing you see here called expose via OData. In this case, I built a query of AR invoices. So this is going to pull out a whole bunch of data that we have. Every time we create a line item on an invoice, that's the AR invoice I'm sorry, that's the AR tran table. The AR invoice combines all those transactions into a single invoice. In terms of geolocation, I've also pulled in the business account and the address. That's going to help me specify things like how many sales I've made by particular states as well as countries. In the results grid, you can see I've listed a few fields, and I've also built in some calculation fields as well. These calculation fields can be used by my generic business inquiry tools to display data that I need and that I didn't want to calculate within my BI tool. Also, the captions I've made more extensive use of here so that those appear as my column headers to my business intelligence tools. If I want to view this inquiry, it's just like it was before. It's an inquiry that runs inside Acumatica that's available for consumption. But the most important part about this inquiry is that I've exposed it via OData. What that means is I can go to various other business intelligence tools and create nice graphical representations of the data itself. So let's show, in this particular case, I've got this one where we've got an OData feed that's been set up that links that particular data. Within Excel, you'll notice that I have this area called data. So let's take a look at some of our existing connections for this data and explain how I connect it to this report. This is the data connection that I'm going to go view the properties of in Excel. I can set this to automatically refresh. I'm just going to manually refresh mine as I need to. And within the data source, here's where I went and pulled that data from. Notice this is the same URL as the site that I have. OData is what I've specified. That's where the OData is exposed to. If I had a company name, I would type that here. In this case, I'm using a single company, so there's no real need to go ahead and specify that. The other place in the data definition is the URL down here. So I'm going to go ahead, and it's going to challenge me because I haven't chosen to save the password for this. It's going to say, okay, I want to go refresh all the data that you created in that file. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So right now it's going out to my local drive. It's pulling all the data specified by that connection and loading it into my report and refreshing all these different charts that I have. So just like that, I'm done. Now the benefit of this is that now I can easily go in and create a whole bunch of different visualizations of my data. So for example, let me shrink this down a little bit. You'll be able to see where we can go in under Design and select different types of data that are available. We can also go in and list out fields that are part of this. So in this case, I selected different fields and dragged them down here to basically, it looks like a pivot table, but it's a pivot chart. So if you want to see how I create one of these from scratch, let's just do this from a new sheet. We're going to go into Data, and we're going to utilize an existing connection. This is the one in that workbook. We're going to go create a pivot chart, and we're going to hit OK. And now we can start creating this pivot chart as we need to. So let's go in and pick something simple like a trend. We'll do a financial period trend. And we need to trend against something. So let's trend against, we'll go do just a simple sales, the extended amount. So now you can see we have a trend line that sets up all the data as it was done against a simple chart like that. With some simple formatting and other things, we can manage the data, we can add new fields, we can even go in and say, well, we don't necessarily want to see every financial period in here. Maybe we want to see the blank ones in some of the 2003 areas. So now we can easily add and remove data from there. You can also do things like add spiffy titles to your area. You can create different mashups of the data as you need to as well. You can even pull in external data. In this case, I use the state by my customer accounts so that I can see how my sales are going by state over a certain financial period. If I wanted to go in and actually take a look at maybe just sales by how my recent sales were by state. I can select the most recent financial period, and you'll see that my diagram changes significantly. I've got a lot of business in Texas this month. So all this helps you get quick visualizations of your data. All these things are very easy to change on the fly through different styles of chart, as well as graphics. And once again, those are all driven by the process of going into exposing the data via OData on your generic inquiry writer. So once again, just to summarize, the generic inquiry can be used to expose stuff to OData. It can be used to create inquiries that can be loaded and saved to dashboards. And it can also be used to go in and add new inquiries to your sitemap. So now we've reviewed 2 of the 3 tools that come with Acumatica for doing reporting. The third one is the Report Designer. The Report Designer lets you get very granular with regards to the placement of things on a physical page, on a piece of paper. It has the same advantages of the generic inquiry tool that we showed earlier, in that it can gain access to all the different tables and all the different information within Acumatica. But the advantage of the Report Designer is it gets very granular and can allow you to do things like print checks, invoices, sales orders, purchase orders, anything that would need to go out to a client or a vendor that would need to be formatted in a particular way. You can also use it, the goal would be to go ahead and produce reports like this, where you can have different graphs linked in with actual data items that would appear on a single report. So let's go show some of the easy things about the Report Designer. Report Designer is the one tool that is not a web-based product within Acumatica. The Report Designer runs as a Windows desktop utility. However, it's tightly integrated with the application itself. So to get started on something we can show where the Report Designer is in action, I'm going to log into the system as the administrator. And I'm going to pull up a report that was done by the Report Designer. A good example would be within the Account Receivable module. We have an invoice or a memo report. Now, if you're granted the proper access, this Edit Report button appears on your any screen so that you can go actually edit the report. So let's take a quick look at what just a random invoice will look like. We'll pull up this one right here, and we'll choose to run it. So there's what our invoice looks like today. Now what we might want to do is we might want to go change something within the layout of this. We can change it by customer if we need to. So to do that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to click Edit Report. At this point, the system automatically downloads a link to that report. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. This link is going to challenge me to enter a password, and it's going to go ahead and open my Report Designer. So this is the interface for the Report Designer. Most of what you do will not involve creating a report from scratch. There is a full-day training class that would help you go through that process if you're interested in it. But for example, let's go into this particular area and just say we'll do something simple and easy where we'll change the background color of that particular area to green. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save my report. Now when I save it, I have a couple different options. Since this is a desktop utility, I can save it to my local hard drive, or I can save it to my server. Saving the report to the server is what's actually going to allow it to be picked up by the application and therefore used by the application. So I'm going to call this one my green version, and I'm going to save this as a new version. So now we go ahead and hit OK, and that's going to actually save it to our instance of the server we were just working with. So now if I go in and I'm going to refresh this screen, and in the Report Versions area, you'll now notice that I have a green version of the report. So if I were to go back and rerun the report that I just showed you with my recent change, you'll see that my change was not all that pretty, but it gives you the idea of how you can modify and change those. So let's go into a little bit more detail about how we can do this and how we can create new reports within the Report Designer. So I'm going to go back to the Report Designer area, and we're not going to use this report. We're going to go ahead and exit, and we're going to open up a different report called the Sales Order Items. This is just a report that I've put on my local drive. As you can see, I've cleaned this one up a little bit, but let me show you how I went and I built this report from scratch. I started, just like you would, with a schema. So I'll go in and I'm going to create this thing called Build Schema. The schema grabs the information from the web services definition. In order to do that, I need to actually log in to my system. Now the schema consists of all the different data files within the system. These would be the different tables and other things that are available to your report writer. As you see, I've already moved 3 of the tables over into the area for this report. I didn't actually need to go through this step. I was just showing you how that you can go access all these different tables within the system. Now, just like the generic inquiry, once I've defined all my tables, I can define relationships between the tables and join them. I can also enter parameters that you would enter at runtime, data filters that would limit the results of your report if needed, and then sorting and grouping conditions. Now the sorting and grouping conditions are a little more important in this because that's going to help you define where you have breaks and section breaks and detail sections that you can then use for your report. One technique that I recommend, instead of using the schema builder here to go ahead and test it, first go ahead and write a generic inquiry. Just using the generic inquiry we talked about in section 2. And once you have your generic inquiry returning all the data you want, then you can copy the tables and the relationships over to your report designer. They both work the same way, so it's going to be very easy to do that. Once we have the actual schema built, all of these fields appear in the tab over here. So you can see the table and all these fields are available, and I can then drag and drop them into my main report area. So that makes it pretty easy to go ahead and add new fields. So if I wanted to take, for example, the business account ID and add it as a field, I would just drop it into the report like that. The headers and groups and detail sections, they all have specific things that are related to them. If you'll notice here in the Properties tab, you can access all the different elements from this area here. You can also just access the elements by clicking on them directly. If you need to go to the top level of the report, this little area right here gives you an overview of all the report characteristics as well. Built into the report designer is the ability to do barcodes and QR codes, as well as to add images and other things. You can see all those up here. So we can add text boxes, pictures, panels, lines, charts. Anything that you see here can easily be added, including sub-reports. In this case, I'm going to access a graphical report and put that in so that it's going to take the information that is being displayed by this report and display a nice graph of it. Parameters can be passed back to the sub-report. So for example, when this particular report is showing a particular user, that information about that user can be passed to the sub-report, which will then display a customer-specific graph for that customer. Within the details section, this is where things repeat. So you can have and you can define individual parameters, such as variables that you could do additions, subtractions, and print totals out. Once again, that's a more advanced topic for a more detailed class. I'm just kind of showing the overview and the highlights of the things here. So once I've gone ahead and I've created my report, the next thing I want to do is I want to actually go ahead and save this report to the server and give it a name. So I'm going to call it something a little simpler than what we've opened up. We'll call it a sales order customer. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. To my site. I'm going to take this and copy it as well. So what this is doing is it's taking this report that I've been creating in Report Designer, and it's loaded it to this site, to this Acumatica instance. Now, that doesn't mean I can see it or it's displayed. It just means that it exists in the database. In order to display that, I have to go into the sitemap. And so I'm going to go into my customization area, sitemap, and I'm going to figure out where I want to add that. In this particular case, I'm going to add it to the sales orders area, and I'll put it in reports, maybe audit. So we can give it any sort of name we want here. We'll call it SO, maybe 62 2001. And we'll call it SO customer, just for a simple name. This is what's going to actually appear in my menu. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to copy this piece of code that you see here. And the ID, instead of this particular report, we're going to actually use the name that we put it in the database. So at that point, once I hit save, we've created a new entry in distribution, sales orders, reports that's going to link to that report. Now, this report is referencing another report as an embedded report. So if I choose to run this right now, it's going to produce an error. So I'm going to actually have to upload one other report that's related to that, that's embedded within there. So let me minimize this, and you'll go in and see the sub-report. And you'll see the sub-report name is called Customer Graph. So when I go run this particular report, it's going to look into the database and say, is there a report called Customer Graph that I can do? Which, of course, there won't be. So we're going to go in and grab our Customer Graph report that I've already created. This is a very similar report. It's got a parameter which is expected to be passed into it that's going to include a customer ID, and based on that customer ID, it's going to produce a nice little graph about items that have been purchased. So once again, I'm going to go save this to the server, just like I did the other report. I'm going to keep that name, Customer Graph, because that's what it's going to be looking for, and I'm going to hit OK. And now this report has also been copied. So now, I'm ready to go in and actually click on this particular report that we just uploaded. You'll notice one of the parameters I specified was a customer ID. So if I want to run this for one particular customer, I can. Or if I want to give my system a little bit more work to do, I'll leave it blank and it'll pull back a report with multiple customers. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. There we go. So after the report runs, you can see I now have a report for my USA bartending school, which shows all the individual items they've ordered, as well as their purchase history in a graphical format. And I can go ahead and manage to see how all my reports are for my different people within the system. Different pagination, different capabilities are all possible with this report writer. So that's one of the advantages. Notice the layout of this. For quick and dirty information where all you need is some quick tabular data, remember, you can always go back and use the generic inquiry for that and move it to Excel and expose it to OData and get information formatted in using a different utility. However, if you want things for invoices and other things that are very nicely configured and presented, the report designer is very effective at that. That concludes the reporting training sessions that we were going to go over. Once again, there's a 3-day class that goes through all of these. We don't offer it online through the university yet, but it's coming soon. So stay tuned for updates about that, where you can actually go ahead and become experts and create reports like this. Thank you very much.